It's wonderful to be here at Reichman University. Chair of the board and founding president of Reichman University, my dear friend, Professor Uriel Reichman. Professor Rafi Melnick, acting president and provost of the Institute for Policy and Strategy, Major General Amos Gilad, diplomats, honored guests. For 30 years, the main enemy of the State of Israel has been the Islamic Republic of Iran. The resources that Israel has invested in contending with the Iranian threat, the financial resources, technological resources, covert and overt alike, are enormous. And it seems that after such a long time, we have to look back on what we have achieved and to decide whether we have to recalibrate the enormous effort that we are making. And the answer is that if we look at what is going on from an intellectual perspective, the answer is yes. And let's start with the nuclear program. When I first became prime minister, less than 6 months ago, I was amazed by the gap between the rhetorics and the action. I found a very concerning gap between the declarations that we will never allow Iran to become a nuclear superpower and what I inherited in the Prime Minister's office. And to summarize, Iran is in a very advanced state. Its nuclear program is very advanced. Its enrichment machine is extensive and broader than ever before. In addition, alongside the progress with its nuclear program, Iran consistently and persistently surrounded Israel by a ring of militias and rockets of all types. In the last decade, from every window in the state of Israel, Iran is looking in. The northeast, the militias, the Shiite militias in Syria. We have Hezbollah in the north and Hamas and Islamic Jihad from the south. Iran has surrounded Israel with missiles while they sit safely in Tehran. They harass us from afar, they waste our resources, they cause damage to our country without even leaving their homes. They draw blood without paying a price. It's an excellent arrangement from their perspective. The obvious conclusion is that this method of chasing specific terrorists that are handled by Quds Force is no longer relevant or logical. We have to reach the one that is sending these terrorists. Since the frustrating days of battle during the Second Lebanon War, I have been I've been haunted by the question of how is it possible that a soldier like Ro'i Klein of blessed memory was killed by emissaries of Iran without Iran paying a price of any kind. How can we accept this asymmetric situation? On the one hand, it's a one-side battle. On our side, Tehran, people are being killed here at the orders of Tehran, while the Iranians sit in their homes protected and safe. The Second Lebanon War was what brought me into the world of politics, and today, as Prime Minister, I do not forget Ro'i Klein or my dear friend Emmanuel Moreno of blessed memory, and all of the IDF soldiers that shielded the Israeli citizens from Iranian terror that makes its appearances in different forms. When I became Prime Minister, one of the first things that I did the second week in office was a policy review. I reassessed Israel's policy regarding Iran, with an emphasis, of course, on the nuclear program, but also considering the Cold War that is ongoing between Israel and Iran in the region. It was a long and comprehensive process in which I learned a lot, and it had two aspects. One was to understand the enemy to the best of our ability, and to understand ourselves, what we have done so far, where we went wrong and where we were successful. And here are my conclusions. First, the asymmetry is the fundamental Israeli strategic failure. They send terrorists from Lebanon, from Gaza, and from even further, and we are fighting with the terrorists that they send. This plays exactly into their hands. That's exactly what they want to happen. They want us to fight with the ones that they send, with their proxies. We have to take advantage of our relative advantages and use them against their weaknesses in a much more effective way than we ever did before. Israel has a very strong, resilient economy. Our cyber industry is leading worldwide. We have democracy, we have international legitimacy, we have mutual responsibility. When we look back at our history, that is how the United States won the Soviet Union at the end of the 1980s. There was never an actual kinetic attack by the U.S. against the Soviet Union. It was using the relative advantages versus the enemy's vulnerabilities. We have to increase the gap with our between us and our enemies, all of them together and each alone. Israel is a very strong country, but it has to become even stronger, much stronger. How can that be done? We need a competitive and growing economy. We have introduced a wave of reforms that take our economy to the next level, and so that our economy will grow on an international scale, and we can use the fruit of that success to invest in empowerment and missiles and cyber and laser technologies and other technologies, and invest in salaries of soldiers. This is the type of empowerment that leaves no room for doubt and makes it clear to everyone that they should not even try us. And my final conclusion is related to the previous one, and is related to the core of the Zionist ethos on which we were all raised: taking initiative, being active, not postponing, not denying, doing what has to be done all the time. The state of Israel must maintain its ability to take action at any time and under any political circumstances. I want to pause for a moment and look around us, take at a panoramic view of where Israel stands now in November 2021. Israel is going in the right direction. We have stopped the political spiral. We have a budget. We have restored stability in the state of Israel. We are coping with the pandemic in a professional and excellent way. Our economy is open, which enables us to grow on fantastic levels. We reached 7% this year. During the fourth wave, not only did we overcome the wave, during the wave itself, we developed tools that would enable the state of Israel to continue living its life even in the case of an ongoing pandemic. Israel will remain open. Israel will be able to live alongside the pandemic and not be managed by it. Our foreign relations are flourishing with many countries around the world, distant and near. The conflicts between our country and our neighbors who have always defined Israel which defined Israel since its establishment, no longer defines us to the same extent. I have held many consultations over the last few months in which world leaders talked about Israeli innovation. They talked about the booster shots. We talked about collaboration in almost every possible field. Israel is powerful, it's strong, it's successful, and open to the rest of the world. On the other side is the Islamic Republic of Iran, an enemy that we are not interested in, a nation that we have nothing against, a regime that, in order to justify its lack of sustainability, marked the great Satan and the small Satan, and we became the small Satan. But, ladies and gentlemen, Iran is not the giant that we think it is. And I want to emphasize that because we tend to enlarge it. Iran is much more vulnerable than we may think. The Iranian regime is corrosive. It is in the most extreme place it has been in since 1979. In the regime, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards are actually running the regime. This is a regime that is unable to supply water to its citizens. Water, a regime with an economy that is weak. It is a corrupt regime that is forcefully controlling its people through fear. And we have to realize that Iran, unlike its reputation, they're not suicidal. They're very protective of their own lives. The Iranian family, for example, has an average of only 2 children. In the 1970s, there were about 7 children on average per family. So they will always prefer to find volunteers from Lebanon or Syria or other places that will fight for them. We see that in Syria all the time. We are at a critical point in this ongoing conflict with Iran, which is actually the battle between the entire world with the radical Islamic regime in the region, in an attempting to create Shiite hegemony with a strong nuclear program. We will not look down. We face a complex time. There may be conflicts. We may argue with our allies, but it will not be the first time. In any case, even if an agreement is renewed, Israel is not a party in the agreement. Israel is not committed and will not be committed to an agreement. The mistake that we made after the previous nuclear agreement in 2015 will not be repeated. At the time, with all the noise beforehand, the moment the agreement was signed, it had an immediate impact on us. Israel fell asleep at the guard post. We focused on other things, and we will learn from that mistake. We will maintain our ability to take action. Honored guests, from the moment Israel was established, it has faced challenge after challenge. Countries change, the names change. But we are never we're never left alone. But nevertheless, we continue, we thrive from one year to the next, building up and deepening our roots in our land. We have become from a small army, from small groups, into regional superpower. We are no longer a poor country. We are a thriving economy, a growing economy, one of the most energetic and thriving economies in the world. The challenges have shaped who we are. They have made us stronger, and to some extent, they have made us what we are today. We will overcome this challenge as well. Thank you very much.